It is a great day to be alive, and I am so thankful for God, Jesus Christ, who lives in us. Today's video is titled XRP Timeline, Past, Present, and Future. Before we get into the video, I'm not a financial advisor. Nothing that I'm sharing is financial advice. I'm simply sharing dreams, visions, and interpretations that I feel God has given me as it relates to crypto. Now, let's get into the video. Before we get to the timeline, I want to just quickly share diagrams and keys that I will be using or have used to develop this XRP timeline. Basically from 3 dreams, 2 of them being a market crash dream, God has allowed me to recognize colors and numbers and dates from each of these dreams, correlating numbers with colors as seen in the dreams, and correlating dates with colors. Over time, God has allowed me to understand specific things like the date of October 17th. Because this date was in a market crash dream, this date has always been correlated with a market crash. However, since God has allowed me to understand a little bit more about this October 17th date, giving me a key with indicators so that whenever I saw the colors, yellow and red, or the date of October 17th, I knew that God was pointing me into the direction of Israel, pointing me into the direction of a crash or a collapse of some type, or leading me to a crash or a collapse. Sometimes in the past, sometimes I'm being led to the collapse of a government or a specific group within a country. More examples of that to come as we go through this XRP timeline. And here is the third and last dream where God revealed to me simply colors within a diagram. And because God had already given me a key of colors corresponding with numbers, I plugged them in accordingly. With this last dream, I was able to recognize 2 colors that correspond with the date of October 17th. So within this diagram, I'm looking at old within the new. But the one thing that stood out about this particular dream was that I was used to seeing 1 item per color, but now I'm seeing 2 items, 2 blue items. So now instead of blue being represented by 40 days, it is now represented by 40 or 80 days, depending. I had this dream on August the 18th, the dream about this diagram of eggs. And then on August the 19th of last year, the next day, a blue moon event took place. I've shared details about this in many videos, but for now, just understand that there are 2 scenarios that gives us a blue moon. And knowing this, I applied it to the diagram with the 2 blue eggs. Based on a little bit more research, I was able to connect these 2 blue eggs to XRP. With much prayer, God gave me more confirmation about the fact that this was representing XRP. He began to give me dreams that I'm going to share throughout this XRP timeline. And these dreams were packed with indicators that are shown here on this XRP key. And so on this key, you see those 2 blue eggs, you see the Julian calendar, you see the blue moon, the date of November 4th being a birthday to an individual that I know. And then finally, there was a connection to Elon, Reebok, SpaceX, and Starlink. And so putting it all together, here is the diagram and the keys. And of course, this did not come to me. I didn't understand this overnight. This came over the course of a year. But I use all of these things to help break down a dream. And when God is leading me to derive a date, I use the numbers and days accordingly. I believe that because God chose to send me these dreams, that even without asking, He would give me confirmation in such a way that I know, number 1, it has to be Him. And number 2, this has to be, in this situation, in this case, about XRP. Now, when it comes down to this timeline, I have already applied the keys, but it's a diagram and the numbers and colors from the diagram, the 4-egg diagram that I'm going to be using. The key helps me to determine whether this dream or what I saw in this dream is a representation of XRP, is a representation of Israel in a market crash, or is it a representation of both. I recap the dream, I apply the keys, and if God is leading me to, I will derive a date. For the table breakdown, I have 3 columns, a starting date, an ending date, and in the middle, the dream or the event that has taken place. There will be a green highlight throughout the table to help you to see where I am. After we cover a dream and a date, there will be a green star to represent the fact that we have already covered that. When we talk about starting and ending dates, for example, if I'm doing a date that's about XRP, you will see an 80D for 80 days. And that is because I took 40 and 40 and put it together to make 80. So if I'm looking at XRP, it'll be highlighted blue. If I'm looking at using 40 days or 60 days, you will see that highlighted yellow or red. And so the XRP timeline pattern looks like the market crash timeline that I've shared in the past. There are times when you will see when one date ends, something else will begin. Sometimes it's a dream that's directly or indirectly about XRP. Sometimes it's major news or events, and sometimes it's research, something that I found that brings revelation and confirmation about the fact that this is about XRP. This dream was about XRP. And so God, he'll nudge me in my spirit. And a lot of times it's spontaneous. It'll just come to me, the idea of what to type in to do a search or when to go back and review a dream. And so throughout this timeline, I will be sharing beginning dates, ending dates, and then you will see what I mean by the next day something takes place. And it's not with every single date, but it's enough to show a pattern. And although God has allowed me to understand how to derive these dates using various keys and indicators, I did not see the bigger picture. I wasn't aware that God was preparing this XRP timeline until about a week ago. Now, this timeline is not perfect. I did realize as I was going through doing this presentation that there were missed dates. And so I will point out those missed dates and I will bring clarity to that as we get to that point. I will let you know and we'll continue to fill in the table accordingly. So we will begin with February the 16th when I had the Reebok dream. After having this dream and with much prayer, God was leading me to understand that this Reebok dream was about XRP. He showed me the X in the Reebok, which reminded me of XRP for whatever reason. Shortly after that, I began to see a connection with other logos such as Starlink and SpaceX. I wasn't 100% confident at that time, but I continued to pray about it. Now, although I wasn't 100% confident that this Reebok dream was about XRP, over time I've come to know and I've seen enough to say, yes, I know now that it's about XRP. And so I believe that's why God allowed me not to understand or not to see this timeline until now, because it makes it easier to apply these days. And so here for the Reebok dream, I'm going to apply 80 days because this represents XRP. So this 80 days will start on February the 16th and it will end on May the 6th. So as I continue to pray for confirmation about this Reebok logo and this Starlink logo, God gave me a dream while I was in Myrtle Beach. And this was an XRP dream. I saw something about ISO coins. I knew something about XRP. A lot more details to this dream. And the video is down below in the right hand corner. But I knew this was an XRP dream. I heard XRP being talked about in this dream, as well as understanding something about Starlink. In addition to that, I saw a rocket ship in this dream. And because I had already made a connection with Starlink prior to this dream, and now that I'm understanding something about Starlink in this dream that's about XRP, I felt that that was confirmation. Moving down the table to May 19th, I had a dream that I called 2 orders will be filled. Wasn't enough space to put it all in there. But this 2 order will be filled dream, I saw 2 individuals, my former pastor, JP Miller, and a classmate, Val, in this dream. I didn't know what God was trying to show me about these 2 orders. What 2 orders? Is it a buy order? Is it a sell order? But God gave me understanding about this dream. After leaving Myrtle Beach, after having the XRP dream, I saw an article out of Myrtle Beach. And the person that this article was about, his name was J.P. Miller. He was a pastor, the same as my former pastor, J.P. Miller. And the attorney to this pastor, last name was Swartz, the same as the CTO's last name. Now, there's more details, more connections here. Again, I'm not going to go through all of the details of this particular event. The video is below. So God was doing a thing with these names. He was connecting this 2 orders dream to Myrtle Beach, where I had the XRP dream, and he was connecting the CTO's last name to this article about an event that happened in Myrtle Beach, all to tie together that this dream was about XRP. For that reason, I started my 80-day count on May 19th, and it ended on August the 7th. And on August the 7th, final judgment came for the Ripple case, although the SEC later on appealed. Now, looking at this diagram, Of course, we know it's about XRP, the two blue eggs. But now I'm looking at the yellow and the red. Again, these colors represent October 17th. They represent a crash or a collapse. It can represent Israel. In this case, it's going to represent a crash, a Japan market crash that took place a day or two before this final judgment came out. It's not a coincidence that both of these events together create this egg diagram. So getting back to May 6th, we know that the Reebok 80 days ended on May 6th. God brought about more confirmation, the fact that Reebok is about XRP. He's shown me the similarities between the logos, Reebok, Starlink, SpaceX. He had given me a dream where I understood something about Starlink. And as I'm working on this timeline, he's given me the date of May 6th. Two things that I found in my research. On May 6th, SpaceX was founded. Now, this research I just found a week ago, so this is very, very new to me. But I've already shared in past videos how Elon Musk was connected to XRP based on the blue moon. You would have to go back and watch that video. Again, finding this out last week was just more confirmation on top of confirmation. But I have the videos here on the side, and the video where I shared all this about blue moon, even the XRP Ripple case timeline that coincided with the taking off and the returning home of those astronauts that were stuck but not stuck in space. If you realize the time that they left versus the time that I shared in my video about the XRP dream and me seeing a rocket ship, my dream and their takeoff happened about the same time, and their returning happened one day before Brad Garlinghouse announced that the SEC Ripple case was over. Not a coincidence. So again, these videos are jam-packed with confirmation. But this, learning about SpaceX and when it was founded on May 6th, this was new. So again, more confirmation. So God has been connecting me to Elon, connecting me to SpaceX from the very beginning, back in February of last year. And so because May 6th has to do with SpaceX being founded, that has to do with XRP. We're going to start an 80-day count on May the 6th, and that 80-day count will end on July 25th. And on July 25th, I had another XRP dream. So on July 25th, basically, I had a dream. My mom in this dream wanted to buy XRP for 50 cents. Now, here's the first correction. The timeline says July 25th. This happened on July 24th. So I want to make a note of that. So my timeline for this is a day off. Okay, getting back to the dream, my mom wanted to buy XRP for 50 cents. Well, during the time that I had this dream, XRP was around 63 cents. So the dream was on July 24th. And a few days later, the Japan market crash happened, causing XRP to drop down to a low of 42 and kind of bouncing in between 42 and 52. So again, we're seeing this entire diagram. XRP, the dream is about XRP, the two blue eggs, and then the Japan market crash caused XRP to go down to that price that I saw in that dream. And that was represented by the market crash colors, which is yellow and red. So now we'll put a star on July 25th, but I want to go back to May 6th because there was something else that I found out that took place on May 6th. And that was the Eiffel Tower was complete. The Eiffel Tower. I did not think this was a coincidence either. First SpaceX, now the Eiffel Tower. Well, you know I had a dream about the Eiffel Tower. Again, this research is new just last week. This is confirming that my Eiffel Tower dream was indeed about a crash. And had I done this research back when I had this dream in September, I would have made a connection. But God does things in ways that blows our mind. And so because I didn't know about this May 6th date, it just made this even more confirming for me. And so here are the videos where I shared my Eiffel Tower dream and how I have come to understand what God was trying to show me about the S&P 500 and how it was connected to the dot-com bubble. Again, market crash. So now what we have is an ending date of May 6th. May 6th that has to do with something about XRP and also something about a market crash. So again, we have this complete diagram. So the Eiffel Tower will be represented by yellow and red, and that is where I'm going to start on July 25th. It would end on September the 3rd. The red for the Eiffel Tower will then start with my next dream or event date, which is September the 4th, and it will end November the 3rd. And then to get right to it, I had my Eiffel Tower dream on September the 18th. And again, here are all those videos where if you want to go back and watch and get all the details about that. Now taking a look at September the 4th, I had a dream that I'm calling Bank Val's birthday. The dollar drop, that's the dream. You may have already seen this video. I put it out last year. But this dream was about international banking, national banking being gone, and me understanding that the dollar was dropping. Val, the same person from the 2 Orders Will Be Filled dream, she was in this dream with me. By this time, I had connected her to XRP as an indicator, simply because she was in the dream with my former pastor, J.P. Miller, and his name was in that article that was out of Myrtle Beach. So I knew the XRP connection there. In the dream, I was looking at a November calendar at our birthdays because my birthday is on November 2nd. Hers is November the 4th. And in this dream, I remember saying that tomorrow is my birthday. That meant that in this dream, it was November the 1st. So 3 dates to keep in mind: November 1st, November 2nd, November the 4th. We will be revisiting this particular dream several times, so don't worry about it too much right now. So after the Eiffel Tower dream, we're moving down the timeline to October 17th. Well, we know October 17th was the date given to me in a dream. So let's start there. As you've already seen, this is a dream, the colors that correspond with that dream, and then the key that God allowed me to understand. And here's the video if you want to go back and see how God put that all together for me. So this dream I had about the ball pits and getting this October 17th date, I had this on September 27th, 2023. Well, I was so confident that October 17th would be the day that I would see the market crash. But that didn't happen. On October 17th, there was major news out of Israel. And that is that article. Then in 2024, I thought, okay, let's take another stab at it. October 17th rolled around, no market crash, but major news came out that day that the individual that masterminded the October 7th attack, he was confirmed dead on October 17th. So although there was not a market crash, instead of giving up and throwing away my date, I decided to take that date back to God and ask him to help me to understand what it is that he needs me to know about this date. And that is when he gave me the explanation, and that is when this key for October was put together. And with the collaborating efforts of many who had inboxed me, left comments, working together, I can't take the credit for anything, but definitely not taking the credit for the ideas that different people bounce off of me. And one in particular turned me to the birthday of this individual who was confirmed dead on October 17th, his birthday. Although the market crash didn't happen on October 17th, this person's birthday was a leading indicator to a market crash. What do I mean by that? October 29th, 1929 was the first market crash that took place, and it was during the time of the Great Depression. So October 17th led me to a market crash as a form of confirmation that God is saying, yeah, I'm showing you a market crash is going to take place. I'm showing you that. And he was confirming it by the timing of this individual's death with his birthday. Now, how does XRP come into play? Well, the date of October 29th can be represented by each of those eggs, blue eggs. That's one way, using the blue eggs from the XRP key. The second way is to use the Julian calendar to add 13 days to October 17th, the day that he was confirmed dead, the day that God gave me in the dream. Add 13 days to October 17th, and you get October the 29th. So 2 indicators from the XRP key lets me know that this event that happened on October 17th of last year connects both to XRP in a way, and also, of course, to Israel, because red and yellow, Israel is on that October 17th key. And it also connects to a crash because his birthday connects to the crash of 1929. So again, everything is within this diagram. I don't think that's a coincidence. Now, because October 17th, this date is going to represent something about XRP using its indicator in some way, and also using its indicator to derive a date of October 29th, and also seeing October 29th twice. We're going to be doing an 80-day count as well as a 60 and 40-day count because of the red and yellow for the date of October 17th. So the individual that was confirmed dead on October 17th, we're going to use his name as we are putting in these beginning and ending dates. So the 40-day count for Simoir in 1929, that started on October 17th and it ended on December the 8th. And we'll get to the red 60 days in just a second. But first, I want to share news that came out on October 17th. The news that came out on October 17th had to do with the Ripple case. This was big news. It was a big deal. Everybody thought what this article is titled, SEC fumbles Ripple appeal, missing critical filing deadline. This happened on October 17th. I remember everybody going crazy over the simple fact that they thought that this meant that the case was over, that the SEC had given up. And so this was big news, but also a false alarm. Okay, so we've already did the 40-day. Now we're going to move on to the red 60-day for Simoir in 1929. We will start on the same day that the 40-day ended on, which is December the 8th. And it will end on February the 6th. Now you see my chart changed a little bit here. February the 6th was a date that I missed as I was creating this table. So the red 60-day Simoir 1929 ended on February the 6th. And there was news that came out on February 6th about XRP. And this article says that the SEC seems ready to advance XRP, Litecoin, Solana ETF applications. So again, this is one date ending, leading us to something about XRP. Now, getting back to October 17th, we will now move on to October 29th, simply because the 29th represents both Simoir's birthday as well as the 1929 market crash. And those two same dates together, it's just like putting together those two blue eggs to make 80. So we're going to start the 80-day count here on October 29th, and that 80-day count will end on January 17th. And of course, there is an XRP indicator that took place on January 17th. We'll get to that in a minute. Now, getting to November 1st, that was a date that I said to hold on to that came from the dream about banking, international banking, my birthday, Val's birthday, and knowing something about the dollar dropping. Again, here's that video if you want to check that out. So we want to focus on November 1st because I knew that the next day was my birthday. The date in this dream was November the 1st. Well, on November 1st, 21 shares filed an S1 for XRP ETF. Now, the reason why I'm starting a 80-day count on November 1st is because Val is in this dream and her birthday, November 4th, is on the XRP key. So here I'm just going to start 80-day count on November 1st. That 80-day count will end on January the 20th. And then there is an XRP event that takes place on January the 20th. Moving on to November 2nd, the second date in that same dream, which is my birthday, God spoke a word to me about Lebanon. I was praying, feeling very heavy in my spirit, and God began to speak a word to me, and I heard something about Lebanon. I'll get back to that in a minute. Moving forward, November the 4th, well, that's Val's birthday. And that takes us back to this dream again. News came out that the judge asked Ripple and the SEC to come up with an alternative resolution for their case. And the deadline for them to have everything filed was November the 4th. So this article did not come out on November 4th, but the deadline in order to have this alternative resolution filed was for November the 4th. Here again, more confirmation that November 4th, Val's birthday, is about XRP because this date is now connecting us to the XRP lawsuit or the Ripple lawsuit. If I say XRP, I mean Ripple. So now that we're done with November the 4th, we're going to move down to December the 8th. On December 8th, the yellow 40 days for Simoir 1929, that ended. And then we have on December the 8th, the Assad collapse. So basically prior to this, you had the Syrian rebels. They swept in, they conducted strikes. And then days later, specifically December the 8th, Assad fell and the president fled to Russia. Well, as I'm reading about this and I'm seeing all this, with Israel and everything, there were articles coming out along with this story about Lebanon. And God had just spoken to me on November the 1st about Lebanon. He spoke a word to me about Lebanon. So one article says, in Lebanon, villagers on the border watch Syria's revolution with unease. Syrians in Lebanon start to head home with both joy and worry. So this is what I believe, this is what God was referring to when he gave me that word on my birthday about Lebanon. Well, that's Israel. That's the yellow and red. But how does this relate to XRP? Well, also on December 8th, we had the 60-minute interview with Brad Garlinghouse. You guys remember when he was on 60 Minutes and how that went. Again, the 40 days ended for Samwar in 1929. That ended on December 8th. And on December 8th, you had the fall of Assad, or the collapse or a crash. That's yellow and red. And XRP fits in simply because Brad Garlinghouse had that 60-minute interview. So for the yellow Assad day count, I'm going to start on December the 8th, and that yellow will end on January the 17th, another January 17th date. I will come back in just a minute to get to the red Assad and show you the start and ending date. But first, because we've hit January 17th twice on this table, I want to go ahead and talk about January the 17th. So here's the video at the top of the screen here if you want to go back and see this in details. But on January 17th, God showed me the XRP indicator by simply looking, or by simply seeing the back of a tea bag that said Blue Moon Milk. When I saw Blue Moon, I immediately connected that to XRP because Blue Moon is on the XRP key. Again, January 17th is an example of one thing ending, something else beginning, and it has to do with XRP. Now, going back to December 8th, we did the yellow count. Let's do the red count. The red 60-day Assad will begin on January 17th, and it ended on March the 18th. And March the 18th is an example of here, we have nothing here. Now, could it be something to go there? Yes. I have not included all of my XRP dreams. There's some that I don't understand just yet. Still working on it. So there may come a time when I have to update this table. Moving down from December 8th to December the 13th, I had another dream. And this dream I'm calling Don't Hold XRP. So on December the 13th, I had a dream. I can't remember if I shared this dream in the video yet, but basically this person in this dream was telling me that they did not want to hold their XRP past January 21st. I asked them why, and they said because I would have been holding it too long for a year in February. So I wrote that date down, and we'll get to that date in a minute. So getting back to December 13th, because I know this dream is about XRP, I'm going to go ahead and start my 80-day count. My 80-day count on December the 13th, and it will end on May the 3rd. We talked about January 17th already, so we're going to move down to January the 19th. And I had another dream, Sisters in Uniform. Here's the video with more details about this dream and why I derived it in this way. For more details, you have to watch that video. But March 27th is the date that I derived. This dream was about Val and her sister. Therefore, I knew it was about XRP. But because it was specific to her sister, I only used 40 days. Again, the explanation is in that video. So I started a blue 40-day count on January the 19th, and it ended on March the 27th. And on March 27th, the SEC was expected to hold a critical vote to finalize the dismissal of their appeal against Ripple. Major news. Moving down to January the 20th. January 20th being the day that the 80-day count from November 1st ended, I derived another date specific to January the 20th. Long story short, on January 20th, I was looking back at this dream about Val and her sister, and Trump was signing an executive order about a Paris Agreement. I did some research. The Paris Agreement went into effect in 2016 on November 4th, Val's birthday. And because I was trying to figure things out on January 20th, and again, Val was in this dream, I decided to start my 80-day count on January the 20th, and the ending date is April the 10th. On January 20th, I also did another count. We'll get to that in just a second. But on April the 10th, news came out about XRP, news that a closed door meeting was taking place. Again, this is from the same dream about Val and her sister, and these are the two derived dates based on that dream. Now, getting to the red star. I had to throw in a red star because I was getting mixed up a little bit when I was doing my table. So now, still looking at January 20th, still looking at the same dream, Val and her sister. For this date, I decided to only use Val simply because this executive order for this Paris agreement stood out because the effective date for this agreement started on November the 4th, Val's birthday. So when I add 40 days from the date of this executive order, I get the date of March the 1st. On March the 1st, I had the Diddy dream. Before I get to the Diddy dream, I want to go down now to January 21st. January 21st was the date given in the dream when the person told me that they did not want to hold XRP past January 21st. So now we're here on January 21st. And for January 21st, there is an SEC Ripple trial date set. Now moving down from January 21st, we're going to go to March the 1st. Again, that 40-day count from January 20th, where Trump signed the executive order. That 40-day count ended on March the 1st. And on March the 1st, I had the XRP dream about Diddy. And I know this dream was about XRP because, like I've shared in all of these videos, Diddy's birthday is on November 4th. It's the same day as Val's birthday. So I knew that this dream was an XRP indicator. Something about XRP was close. Again, I had this dream on March the 1st. Well, 18 days later, we hear news from Brad Garlinghouse saying that the SEC case has ended. What I will tell you is that in that Diddy dream, he was happy, he was excited. I gather that he was excited because he was free. I don't know if that's how his trial is going to end. I'm not into all that. But because God showed me him in a dream being happy, I figured because of his birthday, this has something to do with XRP being free. And it's not a coincidence that Economic Ninja put in his video about the SEC and XRP in his title saying, SEC just let XRP go free. That is not a coincidence. So I went ahead and I added March 19th to this timeline simply because that dream set things up to know that something was coming down the pipeline for XRP. And again, all that came from the Diddy dream. And I decided to derive another date because Diddy and Val both have birthdays on the 4th, kind of like Samara's birthday on October 29 and the market crash that happened on October 29, 1929. Two events, same day. Well, this is two people with birthdays on the same day. So each one would get an egg. Because this dream is not about Val, she's nowhere in this dream. They just have like birthdays. I crossed her off and I decided to add 40 days from the time that I had this dream. And I ended up with a date of April 10th. So here on our chart, I started the 40-day count from March 21st. And it ends on April 10th. Again, we've already derived this date once before. And here we have it again. And again, April 10th, there was a closed door meeting between Ripple and the SEC. We want to go ahead and look at March 29th. I had another dream that I'm calling baby clothes. And Val was in this dream. So therefore, this was about XRP. I'm going to be deriving two dates from March the 29th. And this first date I'm going to be calling unfortunate event. In this dream, I knew that Val was pregnant and had had a boy. In actuality, I understood in this dream and remembered that I was pregnant as well with a boy. But what made it unfortunate is that Val told me in the dream that she had lost her son. And so because that was an unfortunate event, I'm crossing out myself and I'm going to derive my first date using only 40 days. So 40 days from March 29th will give us the date of May 8th. And on May 8th, the SEC announced a settlement with the Ripple case. Very big news on May the 8th. Going back to March 29th, because we both were pregnant, we both were having boys or had a boy likeness, I decided to combine both and do an 80-day count for March 29th. So 80 days from March 29th is going to put us on June the 17th. June the 17th has not happened yet, so should we expect to hear news about XRP? Now, I want to back up to November 29th. That is a date that I missed when I was creating this chart. So November 29th, I had a dream about Bitcoin and an XRP chart. And I shared that dream in this video. Well, I decided to take what I knew about XRP and to apply that. And so I had this dream on November 29th. I added the 80 days and I derived the date of February 17th. At this point, February 17th had already passed. And so now I have to go down to the next indicator on the XRP key, which is the Julian date, or the next one that makes sense. So the Julian date, I add 13 days to November 17th, and I derive the date of March the 2nd. So here I'm going to show in the chart the 80 days from November 29th. That gives me February the 17th. And then I begin the Julian count of 13 days from February the 17th. And again, that brings me to May 2nd. Well, on May 2nd, Trump announced strategic crypto reserves, including Bitcoin, Solana, XRP, and more. And that brings us to the end of our timeline, again looking at June 17th, asking the question, should we expect to hear news about XRP? I hope this helps to explain, and it wasn't too confusing, about what God is showing me as he's giving me these dreams, as he's allowing me to break these dreams down using the different keys and the different diagrams. And I think this table is a final step of God confirming all these things that he's been showing me about XRP. But to see how putting these counts together, how one thing begins and another thing ends, and then with the exception of a few dates, majority of the time, the ending date starts something that has to do with XRP, whether it's an event or a dream or news, something with research. And so I don't know about you, but God has definitely impressed me with this. Again, guys, I have shared all of these dreams, all of these dates with you all in various videos from last year, from the beginning. I actually got a notification on YouTube last night that I had hit my 1 year mark. So it's been a year since I've been putting out these videos. And so with everything that I've been, sharing as far as XRP, as far as the war, I see it all coming together beautifully. And this is the timeline that God has given me. He's given me something to look back on. Now it's all a matter of looking forward. And so here we are. He's given us enough evidence to say, yes, this is confirmation about what he told me about XRP back at Myrtle Beach. XRP is going to take off in a short period of time. And since July of last year, we've seen a lot of things taking place. We've seen a lot of the different parts of the Ripple case coming to an end. And as time consuming as it has been putting together this timeline, putting together these streams, allowing him to show me which streams to use. Again, there are a lot of more dreams that I have not added to this chart that has to do with XRP, but I wanted to do enough to present something. So with all of this, even with the new research that was done on SpaceX founding and the Eiffel Tower being complete, it's just incredible how God could have allowed me to see all of this prior to me thinking that maybe this is connected to XRP, thinking maybe SpaceX is connected to XRP, but he gradually gave me a little bit more, till it came down to the point where it was obvious, and then he added on to the obvious by sending me to do some research on this May 6th date, and I found out all that about SpaceX. So this is all that I have for this video. Until the next one, God bless.